Hello guys, Charles here and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about approach notes and enclosures. We've discussed these in a lot of other videos on this channel, but we've never directly talked about what they are. We've always talked about them passively in the context of a lick or something along those lines. So today we're going to focus on exactly what they are, how to use them, and then I'm going to talk about how I get my students to practice scales once they're beyond the basic patterns. So approach notes and enclosures, sometimes called encirclement, they've got to be discussed in the context of another topic, which is target tones or target notes. All a target note means is you have a note in mind that you are aiming for. Very often it's a chord tone. So for example, in the key of C, you might be aiming for the chord tone of E. So that's our target note. The chord tone of E in that instance would be our target note. Approach notes and enclosures or encirclements are just simply different paths that we can take to get to that target note. Generally speaking, we're talking about next door notes, neighbouring tones, but occasionally people will call an approach note any note that comes before it. But for our purposes, we're talking about next door notes. So our same example here, E, we can approach it from D. So D is the approach note and E is the target tone. We can approach it from above, from F to E. So F is our approach note and E is our target note. Approaches can be diatonic, which is what I've just demonstrated there. In the key of C, D and F both come from the scale, or they can be chromatic. So I could play D sharp or E flat to E, and that would be a chromatic approach. Or I could go from F sharp to E, which, although it's not a next door note, it is a non-diatonic approach note. So encirclements or enclosures are when you play two approach notes, one of them on one side of the target note and the other on the other side of the target note. So going from above to below to target note, or below to above to target note. Again, these can be diatonic or chromatic. So I could go F, D, E, which is above, below, target note. So that's a diatonic enclosure. I could play the other way around, D, F, E. Another diatonic enclosure or encirclement played the other way round. Or again, I could use non-diatonic notes. You can call this chromatic if you like. That's F sharp, D sharp, E. And D sharp, F sharp, E. Or we could use a combination. We could go D sharp, F, E. So that was a chromatic encirclement starting on a non-diatonic note, a diatonic note, down to our target note. So those are the basic definitions, and those simple tricks alone are a big part of the jazz vocabulary, and they're a really important part of our jazz toolkit. So we've got to really get confident with using these. Now, once my students are happy with playing scales in position, 3 notes per string through the modes and 4 notes per string. Once you've got those basic patterns down, which you do need to get, it is important to practice those shapes. Continuing to practice them really only gets you better at playing scales. And although scales can be musical language, we try where possible to avoid simply running up and down scales. So although it's important to keep those topped up and make sure you can still play your scales in all positions, we don't want to practice scales on a daily basis that way. We want to practice scales every day, but we want to vary it. And one of the things that I generally suggest is anything you're practicing, once you're beyond the basics, you need to ask yourself, would I actually use this in a musical fashion? If I was in the middle of an improvisation, is this thing that I'm currently practicing something I would want to play? Is this something I would want someone to know me for? Is this something I would want my style to be about? And by only practicing things that fit those criteria, you're developing not only your technique and your basic understanding and refreshing your memory of those fundamentals, but you're also developing your own sound and really useful chunks, your vocabulary. So one really simple way of starting this is to take a basic major scale exercise, or any scale you like, and insert enclosures and approach notes to try and add a little bit of interest. This way, we are still practicing the basic scale, but we're practicing it with an additional challenge, something that could put us off potentially. We're also going to stumble across some melodic cells that we quite like. So without further ado, let's have a little listen. So to create this sound, I simply took a short melodic cell and I wanted to sequence it, but currently it's too short. This was the starting cell. So I've ended up on my next note, D, on beat 4 of the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, which I don't want. So I need something to slightly delay my target note of D, and I needed 2 notes, so I went for an enclosure. And this was a pure chromatic enclosure. I went from a semitone above to a semitone below to D. And then I want to repeat the same idea on D. The problem is, at this point, I'm about to go straight down to E, which is my target note. But remember, the target note, I wanted to approach it chromatically. So what I did is, for me, I've prioritized a non-diatonic note, which means I've actually had to go in the opposite direction to find one. I've gone up to D, F, G, A, back down to G, back down to F, and at this point, I've gone back up again to an F sharp or a G flat, down below the target note to an E flat, and then I can still approach chromatically, which is what I wanted. I want to approach the target note chromatically regardless. That's just for this particular exercise, I decided that was a priority. So then again in this bar, I wanted to follow a similar shape. But again, I had to do a little bit of, rather than just going, which I could have done, that used a diatonic note, E, F sharp, F. I didn't want any diatonic notes in this exercise. Again, those were just the rules I arbitrarily chose. So instead of going E, F sharp, F, I'm going E flat, F sharp, F, or E flat, G flat, F. So that I've got 2 non-diatonic notes at the end of the bar. 2 non-diatonic notes, and the approach note has to be a semitone. That's what I wanted. Don't know why, that just worked for me. So that's the first time when I get to do the same thing that I actually started with, which is simply encircling from a semitone above, semitone below, to my target note. So in summary, once you have your basic scale shapes down, do keep them topped up, but also come up with exercises that challenge your knowledge of scales at the same time as building potentially interesting material. As I said several times there, I just had this arbitrary list of rules while I was making this exercise, that I was going to use approach notes and enclosures, and that I wanted the approach to the target note to always be via a semitone, and that I only want to use non-diatonic notes as part of the encirclement. You can come up with your own list of rules. There's not really any right or wrong in this, it's just what you like the sound of. Play a few exercises, come up with one a week and practice it for the week, and then come up with a new one the next time, just starting with a simple melodic motif and adding in some chromaticism using approach notes and encirclements. And it's a really great way to continue to build your scale technique whilst coming up with some interesting vocabulary which you'd be proud to be seen playing. So I hope you found that one useful and you now feel confident with approach notes and enclosures, and maybe you've got a new idea on how to practice your scales. If you did find that one useful, please do give it a like, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and share with any of your friends who might find this useful. Also, please do click on my channel name down below and check out the videos. I've got hundreds of videos on the channel now, well over 200, so there's bound to be something there that's going to catch your interest. And as always, I hope you're all doing very well, getting plenty of practice in, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers!
Roll up, let me embed a story you'll never forget. A drip, drip, we're drowning in debt now. You can't buy your way out.